They told her she was lucky to even be in the room. They told her she was a nobody, a blue-collar wife who got above her
The projections
station.
show a 15% growth
When
in
Ryan
Q3.
Matthews
But what about
stood
supply
before
chain
the board of
delays? We have
directors on the
contingency.
Let's review the
42nd
data.
floor of Sterling Technologies
You're here!
Manhattan Tower,
Oh my God!
he expected respect.
Of course, I wouldn't miss
He
this.
expected the handshake his 22 years of service had earned. He expected to walk out with his head high. What he got was a termination notice and a lecture about evolution. The conference room smelled like leather and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, gray and imposing, a kingdom of glass and steel that had no use for men who worked with their hands. Ryan stood at the far end of a mahogany table that could seat 20. Only 6 chairs were occupied. Victoria Sterling sat at the head, her white Armani suit so crisp it looked like it could cut skin. To her right and left sat the directors, 3 men and 2 women, all with degrees from schools Ryan couldn't afford to visit, let alone attend. Ryan wore his work shirt, blue cotton, collar slightly frayed, sleeves rolled to his elbows. There was still a trace of machine oil under his thumbnail that no amount of scrubbing could lift. He'd come straight from the plant floor in Ohio, taken a red-eye to make this meeting. His hands were calloused. Theirs were soft. Victoria didn't make eye contact. She kept her gaze on the tablet in front of her, scrolling through data with a manicured finger. The silence stretched long enough to make the air feel thin. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was cool, clinical, the kind of tone reserved for quarterly earnings calls and budget cuts. Mr. Matthews, after a comprehensive review of operational efficiency and talent optimization, the board has decided to restructure the engineering division. Your position as chief engineer will be eliminated effective immediately. The words landed like a punch to the gut, but Ryan didn't flinch. He'd been hit harder. I see. And who's taking over the X7 production line? One of the directors, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a Patek Philippe watch, cleared his throat. Jonathan Price, MIT graduate, 10 years at Boston Dynamics. He'll be arriving next week. Ryan's jaw tightened. He knew Jonathan Price, knew his resume, knew his reputation for designing presentation decks that impressed investors but never survived contact with the factory floor. Does he know how to recalibrate a thermal sensor when the line's running at full capacity and you've got a Pentagon deadline in 6 hours? Victoria finally looked up. Her eyes were the color of winter sky, pale, distant, unreadable. Mr. Matthews, the era of trade school engineers is over. We need leaders who understand modern systems architecture, not mechanics who learned on the job. The room went quiet. Ryan could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the faint buzz of the overhead lights. He could feel the eyes of the board on him, waiting for him to break, to beg, to prove that he was exactly what they thought he was. A relic, a dynasecond, a man whose time had passed. He didn't give them the satisfaction. His voice came out steady, deliberate, each word placed like a rivet. I designed the X7 production system. It generates 40% of this company's revenue. I've been here 22 years, started as a machinist, worked my way up without a single college credit. I know every valve, every circuit, every bearing in that plant. When something breaks at 2 in the morning, I'm the one who fixes it. Not because I have to, because I know how. Victoria set the tablet down. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Annoyance, maybe, or impatience. Mr. Matthews, we appreciate your service. That's why we're offering a severance package. $200,000, full benefits for 18 months, and a standard non-disclosure agreement. It's more than generous. Ryan didn't reach for the folder she slid across the table. A non-disclosure agreement. so I can't talk about why I'm being let go. It's industry standard. Her tone suggested the conversation was over. I'm not signing it. Ryan's voice didn't rise, didn't waver. He kept his hands at his sides, resisting the urge to clench them into fists. I don't take money to keep quiet. The silver-haired director leaned forward, his expression sharpening. Then you'll receive nothing. No severance, no references, no assistance with job placement. You'll walk out of here with exactly what you came in with. Ryan met his gaze without blinking. I came in with my dignity. I'll leave with it too. Victoria stood. The meeting was over. Your access to company systems will be revoked by end of business today. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. I suggest you don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Ryan turned toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at Victoria, really looked at her. The tailored suit, the perfect posture, the walls she'd built so high that not even her own humanity could climb over them. You're making a mistake. The Tokyo contract is coming up for renewal. Saitama Group doesn't care about your PowerPoint slides. They care about reliability. When the X9 prototype fails, and it will fail, you're going to need someone who knows the difference between theory and reality. Victoria's jaw tightened, the first crack in her composure. I think I know how to run my company, Mr. Matthews. Your father's company. The words came out before Ryan could stop them, sharper than he intended. He saw the flash of pain in her eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. He built this from nothing. He understood that a company isn't a spreadsheet. It's people. And you just fired the one person who could save you when everything falls apart. He walked out before she could respond. The heavy oak door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid. The elevator ride down felt longer than the flight from Ohio. Ryan stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors. 48 years old, crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, hair more gray than brown. Still strong, still capable, but standing in a suit and tie world, wearing work boots and doubt. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, his 16-year-old daughter. How'd it go, Dad? He typed back. I'll tell you when I get home. The lobby was all marble and modern art, a shrine to wealth that felt as foreign to Ryan as the surface of the moon. He walked past the security desk, past the receptionist with her designer handbag and bored expression, and stepped out into the cold November air of Manhattan. The city roared around him, taxis honking, sirens wailing, 1,000 conversations bleeding into white noise. Ryan stood on the sidewalk and let the chaos wash over him. 22 years. Gone. Just like that. His phone rang. Jack Morrison. Ryan answered on the second ring. Jack's voice came through rough and familiar, the sound of too many years in the Marines and too many nights in dive bars. I heard. Word travels fast. Ryan started walking, no destination in mind, just movement to keep the anger from crystallizing into something he couldn't control. You heard right. She really fire you over not having a degree? She fired me because I remind her of everything she's trying to forget. Ryan stopped at a crosswalk, watching the light change. Her father was a welder before he was a CEO. Started Sterling in a garage in Newark. Victoria got her MBA and decided manual labor was beneath the company. Jack was quiet for a moment, then, the X9 line is failing. Production's been down 30% this week. Price can't figure out what's wrong. Ryan felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. He'd warned them. told Victoria 3 months ago that the new calibration software was too sensitive, that it would throw false errors every time ambient temperature fluctuated. She'd dismissed him, told him the MIT engineers knew better. Let it fail. The words tasted bitter. There are 2,000 people working that plant, Ryan. If Sterling loses the Pentagon contract, they're all out of work. The satisfaction evaporated. Ryan closed his eyes, felt the weight of it, the families, the mortgages, the kids who needed braces and college funds and Christmas presents, men and women who'd stood beside him for 2 decades, who'd worked overtime without complaint, who'd trusted him to keep the doors open. He couldn't let them drown because Victoria Sterling had an ego problem. I'll think about it. Ryan started walking again, faster now, burning off the frustration. Right now I need to get home and figure out how to tell my daughter I just lost the job that was supposed to pay for MIT. She get in? Early admission, full ride if I can cover room and board. $80,000 a year. Ryan laughed, the sound hollow. I was counting on that severance package. Jack didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They both knew the math, knew the impossibility of it. A single father with no college degree and a termination on his record didn't have $80,000 lying around. Come by McGinty's tonight, Jack said finally. First round's on me. We'll figure something out. Ryan ended the call and flagged down a cab. The driver was listening to talk radio, some heated debate about economic policy and the death of American manufacturing. Ryan tuned it out and watched the city blur past. All those towers of ambition and glass. Somewhere up there, Victoria Sterling was probably already back at her desk, moving on to the next item on her agenda. The firing of Ryan Matthews, nothing more than a line item in her quarterly report. She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The flight back to Ohio gave Ryan 6 hours to think. He spent most of it staring out the window at clouds that looked like mountains, solid and unreachable. His mind kept circling back to the same question. What now? He was 48. No degree, no savings beyond what he'd put towards Sarah's education, and a job market that wanted youth and credentials over experience. He could find work. There were always plants hiring mechanics, but nothing that would pay what he'd been making. Nothing that would cover MIT. By the time the plane touched down in Cleveland, Ryan had made a decision. He'd go home, tell Sarah the truth, and start looking for work in the morning. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. Sarah's car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic he'd rebuilt from a salvage yard wreck, sat in its usual spot. Lights were on in the kitchen. Ryan grabbed his bag and walked up the path, past the lawn he needed to mow and the gutter he needed to fix. The house wasn't much, a small ranch in a working-class neighborhood where most families had at least one parent working at the Sterling plant. But it was paid off, and it was his. Sarah was at the kitchen table, calculus textbook open, a mug of tea cooling beside her laptop. She looked up when he came in, her expression shifting from concentration to concern in the space of a heartbeat. Dad, she closed the book. You look like hell. Ryan managed a tired smile. Language. You taught me that word. Sarah stood, wrapped her arms around him. She was tall for 16, nearly his height, with her mother's dark hair and sharp wit. What happened? Ryan set his bag down and sank into the chair across from her. The kitchen was the same as it had been when Linda was alive. Same yellow wallpaper, same chipped tile, same coffee maker that took 3 tries to start every morning. He'd meant to update it, modernize it, but after she passed, changing anything felt like erasure. They let me go. The words came out flat, matter of fact, like he was reporting on someone else's life. Budget cuts, restructuring, all the corporate words for "we don't need you anymore." Sarah's face went pale. "But you're the best engineer they have." "I don't have the right degree. That matters more than knowing how to do the job." Ryan rubbed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. "They offered severance, but I'd have to sign a non-disclosure agreement." I said no. "Why?" Sarah's voice was small, scared. She was smart enough to do the math, to know what no severance meant for her MIT dreams. Ryan looked at his daughter, this brilliant, fierce girl who'd already lost her mother and now had to watch her father stumble. He thought about Linda, about the promise he'd made at her bedside 3 years ago. Take care of Sarah. Make sure she gets every opportunity we didn't have. Because taking that money would mean I agreed with their reasons. And I don't. He reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. I won't lie to make things easier. Not even for $80,000. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. MIT can wait. I can go to community college, transfer later. No. Ryan's voice was firm. You earned that admission. You're going. Dad, we can't afford it. We'll figure it out. Ryan squeezed her hand. I promise. I'll find work. I'll pick up freelance consulting. I'll do whatever it takes. You're going to MIT. Sarah pulled her hand back, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across the empty road. Mom told me something before she died. She made me promise not to tell you until the right time. Ryan's chest tightened. What did she say? Sarah turned, and the tears were streaming now, unchecked. She said, if your dad ever loses his way, remind him. You don't need a title to be a hero. You just need to show up when it matters. She said you'd understand when the time came. The words hit like a physical blow. Ryan remembered those last weeks, the hospice bed in the living room, Linda's hand in his as the cancer ate through her. She'd been so small at the end, all sharp edges and fierce love. She'd made him promise to keep going, to not let grief turn him bitter. He hadn't kept that promise as well as he'd hoped. She was right, Ryan said quietly. She usually was. Sarah crossed the room and hugged him again, harder this time. We'll figure it out together, Dad. You and me. Ryan held his daughter and felt the weight of the day settle into his bones. Somewhere in New York, Victoria Sterling was probably sleeping in her Upper East Side penthouse, unburdened by the lives she'd disrupted. Somewhere in Ohio, 2,000 workers were going home to families who depended on paychecks that might not come if the company failed. And somewhere in Ryan's chest, beneath the anger and hurt, a spark of something dangerous was beginning to catch fire. Victoria Sterling stood in her penthouse apartment, whiskey glass in hand, and stared at the city she'd conquered. 40 stories below, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board, all cold light and perfect geometry. She'd bought this place 6 years ago, right after her father died and left her the company. It was supposed to be a symbol of independence, proof that she could carry the legacy without buckling under its weight. Most nights, it just felt empty. The divorce papers sat on her desk, signed and filed. Marcus Wade, her ex-husband, had taken half her liquid assets and moved to Boston with a woman 15 years younger. He'd told her she was too cold, too focused, too much like a machine, and not enough like a wife. Victoria had signed the papers without a fight. The marriage had been dead long before the lawyers got involved. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Mother calling. Victoria let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, Mom." Her mother's voice was thin, weakened by the pneumonia that had kept her in the hospital for the past 2 weeks. "I heard you fired Ryan Matthews." Victoria closed her eyes. News traveled fast in the company her father had built. It was a business decision. It was a mistake. The words came out sharp despite the weakness in her mother's lungs. "That man has kept Sterling running for 20 years. Your father trusted him." Dad trusted a lot of people who didn't have the credentials to lead a modern tech company. Victoria took a sip of whiskey, felt the burn. We need innovation, not nostalgia. You need loyalty. You need people who care about more than their stock options. Her mother coughed, a wet rattling sound that made Victoria's stomach clench. "Your father started this company in a garage. He was a welder. Did you forget that?" Victoria hadn't forgotten. She remembered visiting the original workshop as a child, watching her father in safety goggles and a welding mask, sparks flying as he fused metal into something useful. She remembered the smell of hot steel, the pride in his voice when he explained how things worked. She remembered him coming home exhausted, covered in soot, and still making time to help her with homework. Then the company grew. Then he wore suits instead of coveralls. Then he died of a heart attack at 58, killed by the empire he'd built. Victoria had sworn she wouldn't make the same mistakes. She'd get her MBA, learn the theory, professionalize the operation. She'd turn Sterling from a family business into a corporate powerhouse. But somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of why her father loved the work in the first place. "Mom, I have to go." Victoria's voice was tight. "The nurse said you need rest. I need you to stop running from who you are." Her mother's breathing was labored now, each word a struggle. "You're becoming exactly what you hated when you were young, a boss who forgets that workers are people, not line items." The call ended. Victoria stood alone in her pristine apartment, surrounded by art she didn't care about and furniture chosen by an interior designer who'd never asked what she actually liked. The divorce had taken half her assets. The company was bleeding talent. Her mother was dying. And she'd just fired the one man who could have held it all together. Victoria poured another whiskey and didn't stop until the glass was empty. McGinty's was the kind of bar that hadn't changed in 40 years. Wooden booths scarred with initials, a jukebox that still played vinyl, and a smell of beer and fried food that seemed baked into the walls. Ryan walked in at 8 and found Jack Morrison already at their usual table, 2 pints, waiting. Jack was 52, built like a fire hydrant, with gray stubble and the kind of weathered face that came from too many deployments and not enough sleep. He'd done 3 tours in Iraq, came home with a Purple Heart and a limp, and gone to work at Sterling because civilian life needed structure, even if it didn't make sense. Ryan slid into the booth and took a long drink. The beer was cold and familiar, an anchor in a day that had felt like freefall. "You look like you went 10 rounds with a freight train." Jack's voice was gravel and cigarettes, even though he'd quit smoking 5 years ago. "Feel like it too." Ryan set the glass down. "Sarah's trying to be brave. That's the worst part. She's ready to give up MIT so I don't have to worry." Jack nodded slowly. "Linda's daughter. Tough as nails." "She shouldn't have to be." Ryan's jaw tightened. "She's 16. She should be worried about prom and physics tests, not whether her dad can keep the lights on." They sat in silence for a moment, the familiar comfort of old friends who didn't need to fill every gap with words. The jukebox played something by Springsteen, all blue-collar poetry and highway dreams. Finally, Jack leaned forward. "I did some digging. The X9 situation is worse than I thought." Price can't figure out the thermal calibration issue. He's tried everything in the manual, but the line keeps throwing errors. Production's down 40%. Pentagon's getting antsy. Ryan had known this was coming. He'd warned Victoria 3 months ago, laid out the exact problem and the exact solution. She'd nodded, thanked him, and then ignored everything he said in favor of the software update that Price recommended. "Let me guess," Ryan said. "Price thinks it's a hardware problem." "Spent $50,000 replacing sensors that were working fine." Jack shook his head. "Meanwhile, the deadline's in 48 hours. If Sterling doesn't deliver, Pentagon pulls the contract. $500 million over 5 years, gone." Ryan felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. 2,000 jobs. Families who'd worked at Sterling for generations. Kids like Sarah who needed their parents to keep bringing home paychecks. "It's not my problem anymore." The words tasted like ash. Jack gave him a look. The same look he'd given green lieutenants who thought bravado was the same as courage. "You can lie to yourself, but don't lie to me. You care about those people. You always have." Ryan stared into his beer, watching the bubbles rise and burst. He thought about the men and women he'd worked with for 2 decades. Tommy Breslin, the union rep who'd stood beside him through every contract negotiation. Maria Sanchez, who ran the quality control team and sent him tamales every Christmas. Old Mike Henderson, who'd been a machinist at Sterling since before Ryan was born. They weren't line items on a spreadsheet. They were people who'd shown up every day, done the work, trusted that their loyalty would be rewarded with stability. And Victoria Sterling was about to pull the rug out from under all of them because she was too proud to admit she needed help. "What do you want me to do?" Ryan's voice was quiet, defeated. "Beg for my job back? Grovel so she feels powerful?" "No." Jack's eyes were sharp, calculating. "You go back as a consultant, not an employee. You set the terms. You fix the problem, you save the company, and you make sure Victoria Sterling knows exactly what she threw away." Ryan looked up. "She fired me this morning. You think she's going to hire me back before the sun sets?" "She will if she's desperate enough." Jack pulled out his phone, showed Ryan a photo of the production floor, machines idle, workers standing around, Price looking panicked in the background. "And brother, she's desperate." Ryan studied the photo, his engineer's mind already diagnosing the problem. The thermal sensors weren't the issue. It was the calibration loop, the feedback system that adjusted for ambient temperature fluctuations. Price had probably tried to fix it with software, not realizing that you needed to manually reset the baseline every time you swapped components. It was the kind of thing you only learned by doing, by standing on the floor at 3 in the morning when everything was going wrong and the deadline was a loaded gun pressed against your temple. It was the kind of thing they didn't teach at MIT. "If I go back," Ryan said slowly, "I don't go back as an employee. I want a contract. 5 years, guaranteed, salary increase, veto power on any technical decisions that affect the production line." Jack grinned. "Now you're thinking like a Marine. Hit them when they're vulnerable. Dictate the terms of surrender." "And Sarah's scholarship. Sterling sponsors students every year. I want one of those slots." "You're asking for a lot." Ryan finished his beer and stood. "I'm worth a lot. Victoria just hasn't figured that out yet." He walked out of McGinty's into the cold Ohio night, feeling something he hadn't felt since Linda died. Purpose, not the desperate scrambling of a man trying to survive, but the clear-eyed determination of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done and was willing to do it. Victoria Sterling had made a mistake, and Ryan Matthews was about to make her pay for it. The call came at 2 in the morning. Victoria jerked awake, heart pounding, and grabbed her phone. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, then saw the area code. Ohio. She answered. "This is Victoria Sterling." The voice on the other end was young, panicked, barely holding it together. "Miss Sterling, this is Jonathan Price. We have a situation." Victoria sat up, fully awake now. "What kind of situation?" "The X9 line just went down completely. Every single unit is throwing critical errors. I've tried everything, replaced the sensors, updated the firmware, ran every diagnostic in the system. Nothing's working." Price's voice cracked. "The Pentagon inspection is in 6 hours. If we can't demonstrate operational units, they're pulling the contract." Victoria's mind raced, calculating losses. $500 million. The board would crucify her. Her mother would die, knowing her daughter had destroyed everything her father built. "What do you need?" There was a long pause. Then, quietly, "I need Ryan Matthews." The name hit like a slap. "I fired him yesterday." "I know, but he's the only one who understands these systems well enough to fix them under pressure." Price took a shaky breath. "I'm good at design, Miss Sterling. I can build you a beautiful prototype. But Ryan knows how to make things work when they're broken. And right now, everything is broken." Victoria closed her eyes. Her pride was a physical thing, sharp and cutting. Admitting she'd been wrong, begging Ryan to come back after she'd dismissed him so coldly. It felt like swallowing glass, but the alternative was watching 2,000 people lose their jobs because she was too stubborn to admit she needed help. "I'll handle it." Victoria ended the call and sat in the darkness of her bedroom, staring at the wall. She could call Ryan, offer him his job back, maybe a raise, smooth over the firing as a misunderstanding. But that would be charity, and men like Ryan Matthews didn't take charity. They took pride in earning what they had. If she wanted him back, she'd have to give him something more valuable than money. She'd have to give him power. Victoria picked up the phone and dialed. It rang 4 times before a sleep-rough voice answered. "This is Ryan." "Mr. Matthews, this is Victoria Sterling." Her voice was professional, controlled, giving away nothing. "I understand the X9 production line is experiencing critical failures." There was a long silence. When Ryan spoke, his voice was flat, careful. "Is that a question?" "It's a statement of fact. I also understand that Jonathan Price has exhausted all standard solutions." Victoria stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city that never slept. "I need someone who can fix this. Not in a week, not in a day. In the next 6 hours. You need me." Ryan's voice had an edge now, satisfaction mixed with something harder. "Yes." The word cost her, but Victoria forced it out. "I'm prepared to offer you a consulting contract. Hourly rate, 3 times your previous salary. Fix the X9 line, prove operational capability to Pentagon, and we'll discuss long-term arrangements." "No." Ryan's response was immediate, final. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. "Excuse me?" "I'm not coming back as a consultant hired by the hour, like a plumber fixing a leak." Ryan's voice was calm, implacable. "If I come back on my terms. 5-year contract, guaranteed. Chief engineer position with veto authority on all technical decisions. 40% salary increase. And Sterling sponsors my daughter's education at MIT. Full ride, room and board included." The demands were outrageous, more than Victoria would have offered a department head. But as she stood there in her empty penthouse, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars, she realized something. Ryan Matthews wasn't asking for charity. He was setting his price, and she had no choice but to pay it. "Those terms are excessive." Victoria kept her voice level, negotiating on autopilot even as her stomach twisted. Those are my terms. Ryan's voice didn't waver. You have 6 hours before Pentagon arrives. I can fix the X9 line in 4 if you agree right now. Or you can spend the next 5 hours calling other engineers who'll tell you the same thing Price did. They don't know how to solve a problem they've never seen before. Victoria closed her eyes. Checkmate. And if I agree to these terms, you'll have the line operational before the inspection? I'll have it operational in 4 hours. The last 2 I'll use to train Price, so this doesn't happen again. There was something in Ryan's voice now, not triumph, but quiet certainty. I don't abandon people, Miss Sterling. Not my colleagues, not the workers, not even you. But I won't be disposable anymore. Victoria opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the window. A woman in silk pajamas worth more than most people's monthly rent, standing in an apartment that cost more per square foot than some people made in a year, about to agree to terms that would shift the balance of power in her own company. Her father would have laughed. Then he would have told her to take the deal. Send me your contract requirements by email. I'll have legal draw up the papers. Victoria's voice was ice and steel, giving away nothing. You have 4 hours, Mr. Matthews. Don't waste them. She ended the call before he could respond, before the crack in her composure could widen into something she couldn't control. Then Victoria Sterling, CEO of a company worth $800 million, sat down on her cold marble floor and let herself feel the weight of the day, the firing, her mother's disappointment, Marcus's betrayal, and now this, the humiliation of needing the man she'd dismissed. She gave herself 60 seconds. Then she stood up, got dressed, and called her driver. If Ryan Matthews was going to save her company, the least she could do was watch him do it. Ryan stood in the Sterling Technologies production facility at 4 a.m, surrounded by silent machines and flickering diagnostic screens. The plant floor stretched out like a cathedral of steel and precision, 200,000 square feet of equipment that could build miracles when everything worked, and cost fortunes when it didn't. Jonathan Price stood beside him, exhausted and desperate, holding a tablet filled with error logs that made no sense. I've replaced every sensor on line 3. The calibration should be perfect. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He walked the length of the production line, running his hand along the housing, feeling for heat signatures that shouldn't be there. His fingers found a subtle vibration near the main control module, barely perceptible, but wrong. He knelt down, opened the access panel, and studied the wiring. There it was. Someone had replaced the thermal sensors without recalibrating the feedback loop. The new sensors were 0.3 degrees more sensitive than the originals. In theory, that shouldn't matter. In practice, it meant every temperature fluctuation triggered a cascade of false errors. It's not the sensors. Ryan stood, pulled out his phone, and started making notes. It's the calibration baseline. You swapped components without resetting the system parameters. The software thinks the ambient temperature is spiking when it's actually stable. Price stared at him. But the manual says... The manual was written by people who've never stood on this floor at 3 a.m. when everything's falling apart. Ryan's voice was firm but not unkind. You did everything right according to theory, but machines don't read manuals. They just break in ways the manual doesn't anticipate. For the next 3 hours, Ryan worked. He recalibrated the baseline, adjusted the feedback loops, and manually tested every unit. Price watched, asking questions, taking notes, learning. By 7 a.m, the X9 line was humming with perfect precision, 50 units rolling off the assembly line without a single error. The Pentagon inspection team arrived at 8. General Samuel Brooks walked the production floor with the careful attention of a man who'd built a career on finding problems before they became disasters. He was 60, with iron gray hair and the kind of presence that made junior officers stand straighter without being told. He stopped at Ryan's station, watched him run a diagnostic check, then nodded. "You're Ryan Matthews." Ryan looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir." "I read your file. Started as a machinist, worked your way up. No degree, but 22 years of field experience." Brooks's eyes were sharp, calculating. "I trust men who know how to get their hands dirty, more than men who only know how to run PowerPoint presentations." Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you, sir." Brooks turned to Victoria, who'd been standing in the background, silent and watchful. "Miss Sterling, this man is your most valuable asset. If you lose him again, you'll lose this contract."
Pentagon doesn't work with companies that can't recognize talent when it's standing right in front of them. Victoria's expression didn't change, but Ryan saw the slight tightening around her eyes. "Mr. Matthews has been reinstated as Chief Engineer, General. We won't make that mistake twice." Brooks nodded and moved on to inspect the rest of the facility. Ryan returned to his diagnostics, but he could feel Victoria's gaze on him, heavy and complicated. When the inspection team finally left, satisfied, contract intact, Victoria approached. She looked different in the harsh fluorescent light of the plant floor, smaller somehow, less certain. Her perfect suit was wrinkled from the flight, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the severe bun she wore in board meetings. She looked almost human. "You saved the company." Victoria's voice was quiet, meant only for him. Ryan didn't look up from the screen. "I saved 2,000 jobs. The company is just the vehicle. I underestimated you." The admission seemed to cost her. "I thought credentials mattered more than capability." "They do, in boardrooms." Ryan finally met her eyes. "But out here? What matters is whether you can solve the problem when the manual doesn't have the answer." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying him with an intensity that made Ryan uncomfortable. Then she extended her hand. "The contract will be ready by Monday. 5 years, guaranteed. Full authority on technical decisions. And Sarah's scholarship? I'll personally ensure she gets the Sterling Education Grant." Ryan took her hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike, but he felt a slight tremor in her fingers. She was scared, he realized. Not of failure, but of needing someone. Of admitting that all her degrees and polish couldn't replace the kind of knowledge that only came from years of standing on a factory floor, solving problems that textbooks never mentioned. "I'll hold you to that." Ryan released her hand. "But understand something, Miss Sterling. I'm not coming back because you asked nicely. I'm coming back because the people who work here deserve someone who gives a damn. Don't mistake my loyalty to them for loyalty to you." Something flickered across Victoria's face. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. "Understood." She turned and walked away, heels clicking on the concrete floor. Ryan watched her go. This woman who'd fired him and then begged him back, who ran a company worth hundreds of millions but couldn't see the value in the people who built it. Jack appeared at his elbow, grinning. "You just negotiated yourself one hell of a deal, brother." Ryan shook his head. "I negotiated Sarah's future. The rest is just details. You also made Victoria Sterling admit she was wrong. That's not details. That's a miracle." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "Linda would be proud." The mention of his wife hit unexpectedly hard. Ryan had to look away, blinking against the sudden pressure behind his eyes. "She always said I was too stubborn for my own good." And she was right. But today, that stubborn streak saved a lot of families from ruin. Jack's voice was serious now. "You did good, Ryan. Real good." Ryan didn't answer. He just stood there on the factory floor, surrounded by the machines he understood better than people, and felt the exhaustion of the past 24 hours finally catch up. He'd been fired, humiliated, and forced to bargain for basic respect. But he'd also proven something Victoria Sterling needed to learn. You could buy credentials, but you couldn't buy the kind of knowledge that came from 2 decades of showing up, doing the work, and giving a damn when things went wrong. That knowledge was earned, and Ryan Matthews had earned every bit of it.
600 miles away, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and slow death, Elizabeth Sterling opened her eyes and smiled at the nurse checking her vitals.
My daughter called.
Her voice was barely a whisper, each word a battle against failing lungs.
She rehired Ryan Matthews.
The nurse adjusted the oxygen flow. That's good news.
It's better than good.
Elizabeth's smile widened.
It means she's finally learning what her father tried to teach her. A company isn't just profit margins and quarterly reports. It's people. And the best people are the ones who show up when everything's falling apart.
She closed her eyes, too tired to keep them open, but still smiling. Her daughter was finally learning. That was worth dying for. 2 weeks after the Pentagon inspection, Ryan stood in the same conference room where Victoria had fired him. The view hadn't changed. Manhattan still glittered with indifferent beauty 42 floors below. But everything else felt different. The chair Victoria had offered him was at the table now, not standing like a defendant awaiting sentence. The contract sat in front of him. 37 pages of legal language that boiled down to 5 simple facts. 5 years guaranteed. Chief engineer authority. 40% salary increase. Veto power on technical decisions. And Sarah's full scholarship to MIT. Arthur Penhaligon, Sterling's lead counsel, had placed the document there with the reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. Victoria entered, wearing navy instead of white. Her armor softened but still present. She carried 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of Ryan without asking if he wanted it. The gesture was small, almost domestic, and it caught him off guard. Legal reviewed everything. It's ironclad. Victoria sat across from him, her posture perfect, but her eyes tired. Sign it, and you're protected from any future board decisions regarding termination. Ryan picked up the pen, his own this time, not borrowed. What changed your mind? Not just about rehiring me, about giving me this much control. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it held answers she was afraid to voice. My mother is dying. Pneumonia turned into sepsis. The doctors give her maybe 2 weeks. Ryan's hand stilled on the pen. I'm sorry. She told me something yesterday when I visited her in the hospital. Victoria's voice was carefully controlled, each word measured. She said my father would be ashamed of what I'd become. Not because I was running the company badly. The numbers are good, profits are up. But because I'd forgotten that the workers who build things are people, not resources to be optimized. She looked up, and Ryan saw something raw in her expression, a crack in the perfect facade. She was right. I've spent 6 years trying to prove I could run Sterling better than my father did. All I proved was that I could make it more profitable while losing everything that made it worth running. Ryan signed the contract. The ink was permanent, binding. Your father started as a welder. That's what Jack told me. In Newark, in a garage that leaked when it rained. Victoria's smile was sad, distant. He used to take me to the original shop when I was a kid, let me play with scrap metal while he worked. I loved the smell of it, hot steel and possibility. He built this company because he wanted to make things that mattered, not because he wanted to be rich.
But you got an MBA. Ryan wasn't judging, just observing. Because everyone said that's what you needed to run a modern company. Because the board members looked at a 28-year-old woman and saw someone who'd inherited power she hadn't earned. Victoria's jaw tightened. So I went to Harvard, learned the language, came back and started making changes. Professionalizing operations, hiring credentialed managers, cutting costs. Every decision made sense on paper. And now you're here, giving authority back to someone without credentials. Because you proved something I'd forgotten. Victoria pushed the signed contract back across the table. Credentials open doors, but capability keeps them open. And when everything's on fire, I'd rather have someone who knows how to put out flames than someone who can write a thesis about combustion theory. Ryan tucked the contract into his bag, feeling the weight of it. Not just the paper, but the promise. I won't make you regret this. I know. Victoria stood, extended her hand again. This time there was no tremor, just weary certainty. Welcome back, Mr. Matthews. Officially. He shook her hand, and for the first time since entering Sterling's orbit, Ryan felt like he was standing on solid ground. The feeling lasted exactly 3 days. Ryan was in his new office, actually an office this time, not just a desk on the plant floor, when Jack walked in without knocking. His expression was grim, the kind of look he'd worn during their deployment days when casualty reports came through. We have a problem. Jack dropped a folder on Ryan's desk. Marcus Wade. The name meant nothing to Ryan. Who? Victoria's ex-husband, CEO of Wade Technologies, Sterling's biggest competitor. Jack flipped open the folder, revealing newspaper clippings and financial documents. They divorced 6 months ago. Nasty split. He walked away with $20 million in liquid assets and a grudge the size of Texas. Ryan scanned the documents. Marcus Wade was 40, photogenic in the way wealthy men often were. Sharp suits, confident smile, the look of someone who'd never been told no. The business section profiles painted him as aggressive, ambitious, a disruptor in the defense tech space. What's he got to do with us? Jack pulled out a printed spreadsheet, highlighted in yellow. He's been shorting Sterling stock. Started small 3 months ago, ramped up heavy in the last 2 weeks. He's now holding short positions worth $80 million. Ryan's engineering mind struggled with the financial mechanics, but he understood the basics. He's betting the company will fail. Not just betting, actively trying to make it happen. Jack pointed to another document, an email chain obtained through what Ryan suspected were not entirely legal means. He's been approaching our key clients, spreading rumors that Sterling's having production problems, that the X9 line is unreliable, that the Pentagon contract is shaky. Ryan felt cold anger settle in his chest. He's trying to tank the stock price so his short positions pay off. And if he succeeds, he makes a fortune while Victoria loses everything. Jack's voice was hard. This isn't just business. It's revenge. Ryan leaned back in his chair, processing. Men like Marcus Wade operated in a world Ryan didn't understand. Abstract wealth, paper fortunes, leveraged bets that could destroy real lives without the gambler ever getting his hands dirty. But the consequences were concrete. If Sterling stock crashed, the company would become vulnerable to hostile takeover. Jobs would be cut, the plant might close. Those 2,000 families would suffer. All because one man couldn't handle losing a wife who was better than him. Does Victoria know? Ryan's voice was quiet, dangerous. Not yet. I wanted to bring it to you first. Jack crossed his arms. Question is, what do we do about it? Ryan studied the documents, his mind already working through scenarios. Marcus was playing a long game, chipping away at Sterling's reputation through whispers and rumors. The X9 crisis had been an opportunity, but Ryan had shut that door. Wade would need a new angle, another crisis to exploit,
which meant he'd likely try to create one. We tell Victoria. Ryan closed the folder. But not here. Not in the office where everything gets back to the board. Somewhere private. Jack raised an eyebrow. You planning a covert operation, brother? I'm planning to protect 2,000 jobs from a rich man's vendetta. Ryan stood, grabbed his jacket. That's not covert. That's survival. Ryan called Victoria from his truck, the old Ford F-150 that had 200,000 miles and a heater that only worked on the highest setting. She answered on the third ring, her voice distracted. Mr. Matthews, is this urgent? I'm in the middle of a board presentation. It's urgent, but not something we can discuss over the phone or in your office. Ryan watched the plant workers leaving their shift, tired men and women heading home to families.
Can you meet me somewhere neutral tonight? There was a pause, and Ryan could almost hear her calculating risks, weighing propriety against necessity. Where? McGinty's, 9 o'clock. Before she could object to meeting her chief engineer in a working-class bar, Ryan added, This is about Marcus. The silence that followed was sharp, brittle. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had lost its professional polish. I'll be there. McGinty's was half full when Ryan arrived early, nursing a beer he wasn't really drinking and watching the door. Jack sat 2 booths away, pretending to watch a hockey game on the TV above the bar. Backup, in case things went sideways. Victoria walked in at 9:03, and every conversation in the bar stuttered into silence. She stood in the doorway, wearing jeans and a sweater, the first time Ryan had seen her in anything that didn't cost more than his monthly mortgage, and looked utterly out of place among the Carhartt jackets and steel-toed boots. Ryan stood, waved her over. She navigated the narrow aisle between booths with the careful precision of someone walking through a minefield, then slid into the seat across from him. I've never been in a place like this. Her voice was quiet, almost awed. It's just a bar. Ryan pushed the folder across the table. But you're not here for the atmosphere. Victoria opened the folder. Ryan watched her face as she read, saw the moment comprehension hit, followed immediately by fury. Her hands tightened on the pages, knuckles going white. He's shorting my company. Not our company. My company. The possessiveness in her voice was fierce, wounded. $80 million worth. If Sterling's stock drops another 20%, he makes a fortune. Ryan kept his voice level, factual. He's been spreading rumors to key clients, trying to undermine confidence. The X9 crisis would have been perfect for him, but we fixed it too fast. Victoria's jaw clenched. So he'll create another crisis. That's what I'd do if I were him. Ryan finished his beer, pushed the glass aside. Question is, what do we do about it? Sue him for market manipulation. Victoria's eyes were ice. Bring in the SEC. Investigate his trading patterns. That takes months, maybe years, and it's reactive. Ryan leaned forward. I'm an engineer. When I see a problem, I don't just patch the damage. I eliminate the root cause. Victoria looked at him sharply. What are you suggesting? Marcus is betting Sterling will fail. So we make sure it succeeds so spectacularly that his short positions bury him. Ryan pulled out his phone, showed her a photo Jack had taken earlier. The X10 prototype. Next generation defense system, lighter and more efficient than anything on the market. It's been sitting in R&D for 8 months because you didn't have the engineering bandwidth to bring it to production. We still don't. Victoria's voice was tired.
Jonathan Price is good, but he's not experienced enough to lead that kind of project.
I am. Ryan held her gaze. Give me 3 months. I'll take the X-10 from prototype to production ready. We announce it at the Defense Technology Summit in February, secure contracts, and watch Sterling's stock climb. Marcus's short positions become losses so big he'll never recover. Victoria was quiet, studying him with an intensity that made Ryan uncomfortable. You want to destroy my ex-husband. I want to protect the people who work for this company. Ryan's voice was firm. Marcus is collateral damage. A slow smile spread across Victoria's face, predatory and satisfied. My father used to say, the best revenge is building something so good that your enemies choke on their envy. Sounds like a smart man. He was. Victoria closed the folder, decision made. You have your 3 months, Mr. Matthews. But I want weekly progress reports. And if you need resources, you come to me directly.
No bureaucracy, no committees. Ryan extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it, and something shifted in the air between them. A recognition that they were no longer just CEO and employee, but co-conspirators in a war neither had chosen, but both intended to win. Victoria stood to leave, then paused. Why are you doing this? You could have taken your contract, done your job, stayed safe. Instead, you're volunteering to work 100-hour weeks on a project that might fail. Ryan thought about Sarah, about the MIT acceptance letter on their refrigerator, about Linda's hospital bed and the promise he'd made, about the 2,000 people who clocked in every day trusting that their work mattered. Because leadership isn't about sitting in a clean office making decisions that don't cost you anything. The words came out harder than he intended. It's about standing with your people when the ground's shaking and the walls are coming down. You asked me back because you needed that. Well, so do they. Victoria's expression softened, something like respect flickering in her eyes.
My father would have liked you. Then she was gone, disappearing into the cold November night. Jack appeared at Ryan's elbow, grinning.
You just signed up for 3 months of hell, you know that?
Ryan flagged down the bartender for another beer. Wouldn't be the first time. But as he sat there in McGinty's, surrounded by the familiar sounds of working-class life, Ryan felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years. Not since Linda's diagnosis. Not since watching Sterling slowly forget what it was supposed to stand for. He felt like he had a mission worth fighting for. The phone call came 2 days later at 11 at night. Ryan was in his garage, sketching modifications to the X-10 design on graph paper, because sometimes analog thinking led to digital breakthroughs. His phone buzzed, an unknown number with a Boston area code. He almost didn't answer.
Then instinct kicked in, the same instinct that had kept him alive during late-night emergency repairs when one wrong move could shut down an entire production line.
This is Ryan. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, the vocal equivalent of an expensive suit. Mr. Matthews, my name is Marcus Wade. I believe you've been asking questions about me. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. I don't recall asking anyone anything. Please, we're both adults here. Marcus laughed, the sound cold and amused. I know you've seen my trading positions. I know you're aware of my, let's call it pessimism about Sterling's future. I'm calling to make you an offer. I'm not interested in anything you're selling. Not even $500,000 a year to be chief engineer at Wade Technologies? Full equity package, signing bonus, relocation assistance to Boston.
Your daughter could go to MIT and actually live near campus instead of visiting during breaks. The offer was staggering. More money than Ryan had imagined making in his lifetime. For a moment, just a moment, he let himself picture it. Sarah in Boston, close enough to visit every weekend. Financial security that would let him sleep without calculating mortgage payments. A fresh start in a city where nobody knew him as the guy who'd been fired and rehired in the space of a week. Then he thought about Tommy Breslin and Maria Sanchez and all the other people who'd stood beside him for 2 decades. Thought about Victoria, who'd swallowed her pride to bring him back. Thought about the principle of the thing, that you didn't abandon ship just because someone waved a bigger paycheck. I already have a job. Ryan's voice was steady, final. With a woman who fired you. Marcus's tone sharpened. Victoria Sterling doesn't respect you, Mr. Matthews. She sees you as a tool, useful until something breaks. I see you as an asset worth investing in. You see me as a weapon to use against your ex-wife. Ryan stood, started pacing the garage. And I don't work for men who confuse revenge with business strategy. Interesting. Marcus's voice cooled further. You know Sterling is failing, don't you? The X9 was barely salvaged. The company is hemorrhaging market share to more innovative competitors. Victoria is running on her father's reputation, and that currency is almost spent. Sterling's doing fine. Sterling is dying. And when it does, and it will, those 2,000 workers you're so concerned about will lose everything. Pensions, healthcare, futures. Marcus let the words hang. But if you were at Wade Technologies, you could hire them, save them, give them a real future instead of false hope. The argument was clever, Ryan had to admit. Frame abandonment as salvation, betrayal as pragmatism. Marcus Wade was good at this, at finding the vulnerable spots and pressing until something cracked. But Ryan had been a Marine's friend long enough to recognize a flanking maneuver when he heard one. Here's what I think, Mr. Wade. Ryan's voice dropped, each word deliberate. I think you're terrified. You bet $80 million that Sterling would collapse, and instead, it's getting stronger. The X9 line is running perfectly. The Pentagon is happy. And now you're scrambling to create the crisis you need to make your gamble pay off. Silence on the line. Then quietly, you're smarter than you look. And you're exactly as predictable as you look. Ryan smiled without humor. Take your offer and your short positions and your revenge fantasy and choke on them. I'm not helping you destroy what better people built. He ended the call before Marcus could respond. His hand was shaking, adrenaline, anger, the visceral satisfaction of telling a bully to back off. Ryan stood in his garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, and felt something settle deep in his chest. Marcus Wade was dangerous. Rich, connected, willing to burn other people's lives to fuel his ego. But he'd made a mistake tonight. He'd shown Ryan exactly what he was afraid of. The next morning, Ryan walked into Victoria's office without an appointment. Her assistant tried to stop him, but Ryan just kept moving, trusting that what he had to say was worth the breach of protocol. Victoria looked up from her computer, surprise flickering across her face. Mr. Matthews, I don't recall scheduling. Marcus called me last night. Ryan closed the door, locked it. Offered me $500,000 a year to jump ship and work for him. Victoria's expression went very still, very dangerous. And I told him to go to hell. Ryan crossed to her desk, planted his hands on it, leaned forward. But here's what you need to understand. He's not just shorting your stock. He's actively recruiting your key people. He tried to buy me.
How many others has he approached? The color drained from Victoria's face. If he poaches enough senior staff, production quality drops, clients lose confidence, stock falls. Her voice was hollow, seeing the full picture now. He doesn't need to sabotage the company directly. He just needs to strip away the people holding it together. Exactly. Ryan straightened. So we can't just build the X10. We need to make sure everyone critical to this company understands they're valued, respected, compensated well enough that Wade's offers don't even tempt them. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the desk. Then she reached for her phone, dialed an internal extension. Arthur, I need you in my office. Now. We're implementing immediate retention packages for all senior engineering staff and production managers. She hung up, looked at Ryan with something like admiration. You could have taken his money. Nobody would have blamed you after I fired you.
Maybe, Ryan shrugged. But I've got a daughter who's watching how I handle this. I want her to learn that loyalty isn't about blind faith. It's about standing with people who are trying to do right, even when they stumble. I fired you. Victoria's voice was soft, almost wondering. That wasn't stumbling. That was failing. And you brought me back. That was learning. Ryan met her eyes. We all fail. The question is whether we're willing to admit it and fix what we broke. For a moment, something passed between them. Not attraction, not quite friendship, but recognition. Two people from different worlds discovering they spoke the same language when it came to the things that mattered. The moment broke when Arthur Penhaligon walked in, tablet in hand and confusion on his face. Ms. Sterling, you said this was urgent? It is. Victoria's voice shifted back to business mode, crisp and commanding. I want retention bonuses drafted for everyone on Mr. Matthews' critical personnel list.
20% increases across the board, immediate vesting of stock options, and enhanced benefits packages. Have it ready for board approval by Monday. Arthur's eyebrows rose. That's going to cost millions. And losing our best people to Marcus Wade will cost us everything. Victoria's tone left no room for argument. Get it done. After Arthur left, Victoria turned back to Ryan. You just cost this company a lot of money. I just saved it from bleeding out. Ryan headed for the door, then stopped. One more thing. Marcus knows about the X10. He'll try to undermine it somehow. Steal designs, sabotage testing, something. We need security protocols. I'll handle it. Victoria's expression hardened. Marcus made a mistake when he went after my people. He's about to learn that some things you don't come back from. Ryan nodded and left, feeling the pieces of something larger clicking into place. This wasn't just about saving jobs anymore. It was about proving that companies built on respect and capability could beat companies built on ruthlessness and greed. It was about showing Marcus Wade that the people he'd tried to buy were worth more than his blood money could measure. And somewhere in the back of Ryan's mind, a small voice whispered that this was also about Victoria Sterling learning the lessons her father had died trying to teach her. That the true value of a company wasn't in its stock price, but in the people who showed up every day and gave a damn. But Ryan pushed that thought aside. He had work to do, an X10 to build, and a daughter who deserved to see her father fight for something bigger than himself. The rest would sort itself out. Or it wouldn't. Either way, Ryan Matthews was done being anyone's pawn. He was playing his own game now. The X10 prototype sat on the test bench like a promise waiting to be kept. 3 months of 100-hour weeks, of Ryan sleeping in his office more nights than not, of pizza dinners with the engineering team while they debugged systems that shouldn't have worked, but did. The device was beautiful in the way only functional things could be, all clean lines and purposeful design, lighter than the X9 by 30% and twice as efficient. Ryan stood beside it at 6 in the morning, running final diagnostics before the big reveal. The Defense Technology Summit started in 4 hours. Victoria had rented out the grand ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, invited every major Pentagon procurement officer and defense contractor on the East Coast. This was their shot. Prove the X-10 worked, secure contracts worth hundreds of millions, and watch Marcus Wade's short positions turn into financial suicide. No pressure. Jack walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee that smelled like burnt hope. "You look like death warmed over." Ryan accepted the cup, took a long drink. "Feel worse than I look. System checks clean?" "Every single one. We're ready." Ryan's eyes felt like sandpaper. His back ached from too many nights on the office couch, but satisfaction burned through the exhaustion. "This thing is perfect, Jack. Better than perfect. It's going to change the game." "Then why do you look like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop?" Because Ryan had learned the hard way that nothing ever went smoothly when Marcus Wade was involved. In the 3 months since that phone call, Wade had been quiet. Too quiet. No more recruitment attempts, no rumors spreading through industry channels, just silence. And silence from a man like Marcus meant he was planning something. Just nerves. Ryan set down his coffee, pulled up the presentation files one more time. Victoria would handle the business pitch, but Ryan had to explain the technical innovations in language that generals and procurement officers could understand. "What time does Victoria get here?" "She's already here. Been in the ballroom since 5, obsessing over seating charts." Jack's expression softened. "You two make a good team. Didn't think I'd say that 3 months ago." Ryan didn't answer. The truth was complicated. Victoria had changed, or maybe she'd just stopped pretending to be something she wasn't. She came to the plant floor now, asked questions instead of issuing orders, learned the names of workers she'd previously ignored. Last week, she'd shown up to Maria Sanchez's daughter's quinceañera, brought a gift, stayed for 3 hours talking to families like she actually cared. Maybe she did care. Maybe firing Ryan had been the wake-up call she needed. Or maybe she was just good at adapting, at becoming whatever the situation required. Ryan didn't let himself think too hard about which option was true. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Good luck today, Dad. You're going to crush it. Mom would be so proud." Ryan stared at the message, feeling the familiar ache of absence. Linda had been gone 3 years, but mornings like this, big moments when he needed her steady presence, the loss felt fresh as an open wound. She should have been here to see this, to watch their daughter thrive at MIT, to witness Ryan rebuilding something he thought was lost forever. He typed back, "Love you, kiddo. Study hard." Then he pocketed the phone, pushed down the grief, and focused on the work. There would be time for feelings later. Right now, he had a company to save. The grand ballroom was transformed. Sterling Technologies banners hung from the ceiling, the company logo projected onto screens the size of billboards. Round tables filled the space, each one carefully arranged with name cards for the VIPs Victoria had courted for months. At the front, a stage held the podium, the presentation screen, and off to the side, covered by a black cloth, the X-10 prototype. Ryan stood backstage, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. He bought a new suit for this, nothing fancy, just something that fit properly and didn't have grease stains on the cuffs. Victoria had offered to have her tailor make him something custom, but Ryan had declined. He wasn't trying to be someone else. He was just trying to look professional enough that generals wouldn't dismiss him before he started talking. Victoria appeared beside him, and Ryan's breath caught. She wore midnight blue, elegant without being flashy, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look both powerful and somehow vulnerable. She'd lost weight in the past 3 months, the stress of fighting Marcus burning through her like fuel. "You ready for this?" Her voice was steady, but Ryan caught the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted her notes. "Are you?" Victoria smiled, tight and fierce. "I've been ready for 3 months. This is our chance to prove that Sterling isn't just my father's legacy, it's our future." The possessive plural made something shift in Ryan's chest. Our future. When had it become that? "Marcus is here." Victoria's voice dropped. "I saw him come in 10 minutes ago. Front row, center table. He brought his entire executive team." Ryan felt cold satisfaction settle into his bones. Good. Let him watch us bury him. The ballroom filled quickly. Ryan watched from backstage as Pentagon officials filed in, as CEOs and procurement officers found their seats, as the room buzzed with anticipation. General Samuel Brooks was there, the man who'd saved Sterling's contract during the X-9 crisis. He caught Ryan's eye and nodded, respect between men who understood that words mattered less than results. At exactly 9 o'clock, Victoria walked onto the stage. The room quieted immediately, all eyes on her. She commanded the space with the kind of presence that came from finally knowing who she was, not her father's daughter, not Marcus's ex-wife, but herself.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Victoria's voice carried without strain, clear and confident. 3 months ago, Sterling Technologies faced a crisis that should have destroyed us. Production failures, client concerns, internal instability. Many of you wondered if we'd survive. She paused, let the tension build. Ryan could see Marcus in the front row, his expression carefully neutral, but something predatory lurked beneath the mask. We not only survived, we evolved. Victoria clicked the remote, and the screen behind her lit up with the X-10 schematics. What you're about to see represents the next generation of defense technology. Lighter, faster, more efficient than anything currently in production. And it works. That was Ryan's cue. He walked onto the stage, feeling hundreds of eyes track his movement. Public speaking had never been his strength, but he'd practiced this presentation until the words felt like second nature. I'm Ryan Matthews, Chief Engineer at Sterling Technologies. Ryan's voice was rough from lack of sleep, but steady. I started as a machinist 22 years ago. No college degree, no fancy credentials, just a willingness to learn how things worked by taking them apart and putting them back together. He saw some of the suits in the audience exchange glances, skepticism maybe, or confusion about why a CEO would let someone without credentials represent her company at such a critical moment. The X-10 was designed using that same philosophy. We didn't start with theory. We started with the question, what do soldiers actually need in the field? Ryan pulled up combat footage, real scenarios from recent deployments. They need equipment that works when everything else is falling apart, that doesn't fail because of dust or heat, or the kind of stress that no laboratory can replicate. For the next 20 minutes, Ryan walked them through it. The innovations in thermal management, the redundant systems that kept the device operational even when components failed, the user interface designed with input from actual soldiers instead of focus groups. He spoke in plain language, no jargon, just honest explanation of how the thing worked and why it mattered. When he finished, the room was silent. Then General Brooks stood and started clapping. Others joined, the applause building until the ballroom thundered with it. Ryan stepped back,
let Victoria take over for the business portion of the pitch. She talked numbers, production timelines, pricing structures, contract terms. But Ryan barely heard her. He was watching Marcus Wade, watching the man's expression shift from confident to uncertain to something darker. Marcus knew he'd lost. The X10 was real, it worked, and Sterling Technologies was about to secure contracts that would send the stock price soaring. All those short positions, $80 million betting on failure, were about to become catastrophic losses. Victoria finished her pitch and unveiled the prototype. The black cloth fell away, revealing the X10 in all its functional beauty. Cameras flashed. People stood for a better look. General Brooks approached the stage, examined the device with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many promises fail to deliver. "How soon can you produce at scale?" His voice carried authority that made junior officers across the room stand straighter. Victoria didn't hesitate. "First units delivered in 6 months. Full production capacity within a year." "And you're confident in the reliability?" Brooks looked at Ryan now, general to engineer. "No surprises like the X9? Ryan met his gaze without flinching. "General, I've personally tested every system on this device. I've run it through failure scenarios that would make your field teams weep. It works. And when something does eventually break, because everything breaks eventually, it's designed to be repaired by someone with basic tools and common sense, not a PhD. Brooks smiled, the kind of smile that meant decisions were being made in real time. "I want to discuss a long-term contract, exclusively with Sterling. Can you be in Washington next week?" "We'll be there." Victoria's voice was triumph barely contained. The presentation ended. People swarmed the stage, asking questions, requesting demos, pulling out business cards. Ryan fielded technical queries while Victoria handled the business side, and somewhere in the chaos, he caught her eye across the crowd. She smiled, real and unguarded, and Ryan felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. He pushed it down. There was still work to do. Marcus Wade left without speaking to anyone, his executive team trailing behind like soldiers retreating from a lost battle. Ryan watched him go and felt no satisfaction, only grim certainty that this wasn't over. Men like Marcus didn't accept defeat gracefully. The attack came 3 days later, at 2 a.m. Ryan was home for once, actually sleeping in his own bed, when his phone started buzzing with emergency alerts. He grabbed it, saw Jack's name, and answered immediately. "The plant's on fire." Jack's voice was rough with smoke and adrenaline. "Someone hit the R&D lab. The whole wing is burning." Ryan was out of bed and pulling on clothes before his brain fully processed the words. "Anyone hurt?" "Night security guard got out with minor smoke inhalation. Fire department's here, but Ryan..." Jack's voice cracked. "The X10 prototypes were in that lab. All of them." Cold dread flooded Ryan's system. The prototypes, the testing equipment, 3 months of work. Gone. And with the Defense Technology Summit still fresh in everyone's minds, with contracts being negotiated and deals being finalized, this looked like exactly what it was. Sabotage, designed to prove Sterling couldn't deliver on its promises. "I'm on my way." Ryan grabbed his truck keys, was out the door in under a minute. "Call Victoria, and Jack, get the security footage from tonight. All of it." The drive to the plant took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Ryan could see the glow against the sky long before he reached the facility, orange and angry, consuming everything it touched. Fire trucks surrounded the building, water cannons fighting flames that didn't want to die. Victoria was already there, standing behind the barricade line in jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked shattered, watching her company burn. Ryan approached, and she turned to him with eyes that held something beyond despair.
They're saying it started in the electrical system.
An accident. It wasn't an accident. Ryan's voice was hard, certain. Marcus did this. You don't know that? Yes, I do. Ryan pulled out his phone, showed her a text message that had come through while he was driving. Unknown number, just 3 words. Better luck next time. Victoria stared at the message, her expression shifting from grief to fury. He burned my company because we beat him. He burned the lab because destroying the prototypes means we can't deliver on the Pentagon contracts. General Brooks wanted exclusivity, wanted guaranteed timelines. If we can't produce, the deal falls apart. Ryan watched the flames, calculating. And if the deal falls apart, Sterling's stock crashes. Marcus's short positions pay off, and he gets rich while we lose everything. So we rebuild. Victoria's jaw set with determination. We have the designs, the specifications. We can remake the prototypes. In 6 months, maybe. Not in time to meet the delivery schedule we promised.
Ryan felt the weight of it, the impossibility. And even if we could, there's no guarantee Marcus won't just burn it down again. They stood in silence, watching firefighters battle an inferno that had already won. Somewhere in that building, 3 months of Ryan's life was turning to ash. The late nights, the problem solving, the moment when everything clicked and the X-10 went from theoretical to real. All of it gone. Jack appeared, covered in soot, carrying a laptop. Security footage. You need to see this. They huddled around the screen, watching grainy black and white video. At 1:47 a.m., a figure in dark clothing and a baseball cap approached the R&D lab. They moved with purpose, not like someone who'd gotten lost or wandered in by accident. At the door, they pulled out what looked like a key card. Employee access. Zoom in on the card. Ryan's voice was tight. Jack enhanced the image. The card was clearly visible. Sterling Technologies employee badge, though the name was too blurred to read. Inside job. Victoria's voice was hollow. Someone on our team did this. Or someone who stole an employee's access credentials. Ryan studied the figure's movements, the way they held themselves. Something familiar nagged at him, but he couldn't place it. Jack, can you trace which badge was used? Already on it. Jack pulled up access logs, scrolled through entries. Here, badge number 2847, registered to Jonathan Price. The name landed like a punch. Jonathan Price, the MIT graduate who'd replaced Ryan, who'd failed to fix the X9 crisis, who'd been quietly resentful ever since Ryan returned as his superior. Ryan had tried to mentor him, teach him the practical skills that textbooks couldn't provide. Apparently, that generosity had been repaid with betrayal. Where is he now? Ryan's voice was dangerous, controlled. Security tried calling him. No answer. His apartment's empty. Neighbor says he left yesterday with 2 suitcases. Jack's expression was grim. He's gone. Victoria pulled out her phone, dialed a number. Arthur, I need you to track every financial transaction Jonathan Price has made in the last 6 months. Bank accounts, credit cards, everything. Call in whatever favors you need with law enforcement. She ended the call and turned to Ryan. If Marcus paid him to do this, there will be a trail. And if there's not? If Price covered his tracks? Ryan watched the fire, watched his work burn. We still have nothing. Then we make something from nothing. Victoria's voice was steel wrapped in silk. That's what we've been doing for 3 months. We don't stop now. Ryan wanted to believe her, wanted to think that determination alone could overcome arson and sabotage
and the ruthless calculation of men who saw destruction as just another business strategy. But standing there in the cold pre-dawn air, watching flames consume the future he'd built, Ryan felt something close to despair. They'd been so close, and now it was ash. The investigation took 2 days. FBI got involved because of the government contracts, brought in forensic accountants who traced money with the same precision Ryan applied to engineering problems. What they found was damning. A series of payments from a shell company registered in Delaware, totaling $200,000, deposited into Jonathan Price's offshore account over a 6-week period. The shell company's ownership was hidden behind layers of legal obfuscation, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Payments started the day after Marcus Wade's phone call to Ryan, the call where he'd tried to recruit Sterling's chief engineer and been rejected. Price was arrested in Boston, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. He cracked within 3 hours of interrogation, admitted everything. Marcus had approached him 6 weeks ago, offered him money to sabotage the X-10 launch. Not because Marcus cared about Price or his career, but because a disgruntled employee was the perfect weapon, someone with access, with motive, with technical knowledge to do maximum damage. The FBI wanted to bring charges against Marcus too, but Price's confession wasn't enough. He had no direct proof that Marcus was behind the shell company, no recordings or emails that definitively linked the payments to Wade Technologies. Marcus's lawyers had made sure of that. So Marcus Wade walked free, while Jonathan Price faced federal charges for arson and corporate espionage. Ryan sat in Victoria's office 3 days after the fire, both of them exhausted beyond words. The plant was salvageable. The fire had been contained to the R&D wing, and insurance would cover the physical damage, but the prototypes were gone. The timeline was destroyed, and General Brooks had already sent a polite but firm email postponing contract negotiations until Sterling could demonstrate production capability. We lost. Victoria's voice was flat, defeated in a way Ryan had never heard. Marcus won. Not yet. Ryan pulled out a folder, set it on her desk. I've been thinking about this wrong. We've been playing defense, trying to protect what we have. But Marcus keeps coming because he knows we're vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. Victoria opened the folder, scanned the documents inside. Her eyes widened. This is... You want to go public with everything? The short positions? The sabotage? Price's confession? I want to destroy Marcus Wade's reputation so thoroughly that no one in the defense industry will ever work with him again. Ryan leaned forward. Price's testimony might not be enough for criminal charges, but it's enough for a lawsuit. Civil case, wrongful interference with business contracts. And while that plays out in court, we leak everything to the press. The Wall Street Journal, Defense News, every outlet that covers government contracting. That's scorched earth. Victoria's hands trembled slightly. If we do this, there's no going back. Marcus will retaliate with everything he has. Let him try. Ryan's voice was hard, final. I'm done playing nice with a man who tried to burn down my work because he couldn't handle losing. You want to honor your father's legacy? Show the world that Sterling Technologies doesn't fold when bullies come calling. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying Ryan's face. Then she reached for her phone. Arthur, I need you to file a lawsuit against Marcus Wade and Wade Technologies. Wrongful interference, corporate espionage, whatever charges will hurt the most. And then I need you to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. She hung up and met Ryan's eyes. My father used to say that the business world respects strength more than kindness. I never understood what he meant until now. He meant that sometimes the right thing looks like the hard thing. Ryan stood.
And right now, the hard thing is making sure Marcus pays for what he did. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Sterling's Manhattan headquarters. Victoria stood at the podium, flanked by Arthur Penhaligon and Ryan, facing a room full of reporters who'd been promised a major announcement. The energy was electric, speculation running wild about what Sterling would reveal. Victoria didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid out everything: Marcus's short positions, his attempts to recruit key Sterling personnel, the shell company payments to Jonathan Price, the arson that had destroyed 3 months of work. She presented documentation, bank records, Price's confession transcript. She left nothing to imagination. Marcus Wade attempted to destroy Sterling Technologies not through competition, but through sabotage. Victoria's voice was clear, unwavering. He couldn't build something better, so he tried to burn down what we created. That's not business. That's cowardice. The room erupted with questions, reporters shouting over each other. Victoria fielded them with surgical precision, never losing composure, never backing down. She was magnificent, a woman who'd found her strength in the crucible of crisis. Ryan stood beside her, silent support, and watched Marcus Wade's world unravel in real time. By noon, the story was everywhere. Financial news networks ran it as breaking news. Defense industry publications featured it on their front pages. Social media exploded with commentary about corporate sabotage and the ethics of short selling. Wade Technologies' stock price plummeted 15% in the first hour of trading. By 5 p.m., 3 of Marcus's biggest clients had canceled their contracts, citing concerns about business ethics and reliability. By midnight, the SEC had announced an investigation into Marcus's trading practices. Marcus tried to fight back, issued a statement calling the allegations baseless and defamatory, threatened countersuits. But the damage was done. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and in the world of government contracting, where reputation was everything, Marcus Wade was finished. Ryan sat in his office at the plant, watching the news coverage on his laptop, when Victoria appeared in the doorway. She looked different, lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "We did it." Her voice was wondering, almost disbelieving. "We actually did it." "You did it." Ryan closed the laptop. "I just gave you the ammunition." Victoria crossed the room, sat in the chair across from his desk. "No. We did it together. That's what I'm finally understanding. My father didn't build this company alone. He had people he trusted, people who stood beside him when things got hard. I tried to do everything myself, and it nearly destroyed me." "So what now?" Ryan asked. "Marcus is down but not out. He still has resources, connections. He could rebuild. Let him try." Victoria's smile was sharp, satisfied. "By the time he does, we'll be too far ahead for him to catch up. Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss." She pulled out a document, slid it across the desk. Ryan scanned it, his eyes widening as he processed the words. "You're offering me COO position?" His voice was careful, not quite believing. "Chief Operating Officer, full board seat, equity stake in the company." Victoria's expression was serious now, vulnerable. "Ryan, you're not just my chief engineer. You're the person who saved this company twice. Once when you fixed the X9, and again when you showed me how to fight back. I need you in leadership, making decisions that shape our future." Ryan stared at the document, at the title that would make him one of the most powerful people in the company. A year ago, he'd been a machinist who learned engineering on the job. 6 months ago, he'd been fired for not having the right credentials. And now, Victoria Sterling was offering him authority that would make him untouchable. "I don't have an MBA." The objection came out automatic, a reflex born from years of being told he wasn't enough. "You have something better. You have wisdom earned from standing on factory floors and solving real problems." Victoria leaned forward. "Credentials open doors, but character keeps them open. And Ryan, you have more character than anyone I've ever met."
The words hit harder than they should have, touched something deep in Ryan's chest that he'd thought was buried with Linda. He looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and saw not the Ice Queen CEO who'd fired him, but a woman who'd fought her way through loss and pride and learned to see value in places she'd been taught to ignore. "I need time to think about it." Ryan's voice was rough. It's a lot." "Take all the time you need." Victoria stood, headed for the door, then paused. "Ryan, thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself." She left before he could respond. Ryan sat alone in his office, the COO offer in front of him, and felt the full weight of how far he'd come. From fired engineer to chief operating officer in 6 months. Linda would have laughed, would have told him he'd earned every bit of it, would have reminded him that being underestimated was an advantage because people never saw you coming. Ryan's phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Dad, I just saw the news. You're a total badass. Mom would be so proud." He smiled, felt tears prick his eyes, and allowed himself a moment to feel it all: the grief, the victory, the terrifying possibility of a future he'd never imagined. Then he picked up a pen and signed the COO agreement, committing himself to a path he still wasn't sure he deserved, but was damn well going to earn. 6 weeks later, Ryan stood in the Ohio manufacturing plant, watching as the first production run of X-10 units rolled off the assembly line. They'd rebuilt faster than anyone thought possible, pulled in resources from across the company, and delivered on the promise they'd made at the Defense Technology Summit. General Brooks was there for the ceremonial first unit delivery, accepting it with the kind of satisfaction that came from betting on the right horse. "You pulled off a miracle, Matthews." Ryan shook his head. "Just did the work, sir. Miracles are for people who pray instead of plan." Brooks laughed, the sound genuine. "I like you. Pentagon needs more people who understand that theory without practice is just expensive daydreaming." He lowered his voice. "I heard what happened with Marcus Wade. That took guts, going public like that." "It took being tired of watching bullies win." Ryan's voice was quiet but firm. "Sometimes you have to stand up and say enough, even when it's scary." Brooks nodded slowly. "Well, you've got the Pentagon's business for the foreseeable future, and more importantly, you've got our respect." After Brooks left, Ryan walked the production floor, stopping to talk with the workers who'd made this possible. Tommy Breslin, who'd volunteered for double shifts to meet the deadline, Maria Sanchez, who'd caught a critical quality control issue before it became a problem, old Mike Henderson, who'd been at Sterling longer than Ryan and still knew more about machinery than anyone with 3 PhDs. These were the people Marcus Wade had tried to destroy with his short-sighted revenge. These were the people Victoria had forgotten to value until crisis forced her to see them clearly. And these were the people Ryan had fought for, would keep fighting for, because leadership wasn't about titles or corner offices. It was about standing with your team when the world was on fire and refusing to let them burn alone. Victoria found him near the end of the shift, standing by the same machines where he'd started as a 26-year-old machinist with more ambition than sense. She'd taken to visiting the plant regularly now, learning names, understanding processes, becoming the kind of CEO her father had been before success had pulled him away from the floor. "Penny for your thoughts?" Her voice was soft, careful. Ryan turned, managed a tired smile. "Just thinking about how much has changed. A year ago, I thought I had it all figured out.
Show up, do good work, retire with a pension and maybe enough saved to help Sarah through college. And now? Now I'm COO of a company worth $1 billion. My daughter's thriving at MIT, and the man who tried to destroy us is facing federal investigation and professional ruin."
Ryan shook his head. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming." Victoria stepped closer, close enough that Ryan could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that probably cost more than his first car. "If it's a dream, I hope we don't wake up." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Ryan was acutely aware of how different they were. CEO and engineer, Harvard MBA and trade school graduate, penthouse and ranch house. But they'd built something together, forged in crisis and tempered by victory. And somewhere along the way, Ryan had stopped seeing Victoria as his boss and started seeing her as something else. "I should get home." Ryan stepped back, breaking the moment. "Sarah's visiting this weekend. First time since the fire." "Of course." Victoria's expression was carefully neutral, but Ryan caught the flash of disappointment. "Give her my regards." Ryan nodded and left, walking out into the cold February evening. He climbed into his truck, still the same F-150 despite the significant raise that came with the COO position, and sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel. He'd loved Linda with everything he had. Their marriage had been built on shared history, on growing up together and building a life from nothing. What he felt for Victoria was different. Respect forged in battle, admiration for someone who'd learned to admit weakness and grow from it. But Linda had been gone 3 years, and Sarah had told him on her mother's deathbed that Linda wanted him to keep living, to find happiness again. Ryan started the truck and drove home, letting the question sit unanswered for now. The weekend with Sarah was exactly what Ryan needed. She arrived Friday evening, bursting with stories about MIT, the brilliant professors, the impossible problem sets, the friends she'd made from every corner of the world. She was thriving in ways that made Ryan's chest ache with pride. Saturday morning, they sat at the kitchen table over coffee and pancakes, and Sarah studied him with a kind of perception that reminded Ryan painfully of Linda. "You look different, Dad. Lighter." Ryan shrugged. "Been sleeping better. Now that the X-10 is in production, the pressure's off." "It's not just that." Sarah tilted her head, considering. "You look happy. Like actually happy, not just getting through the day happy." Ryan stared into his coffee, seeing his reflection ripple on the surface. "I guess I am. For the first time since your mom died, I feel like I'm building something instead of just surviving." "And Victoria Sterling?" Sarah's voice was careful, gentle. "What's going on there?" Ryan looked up sharply. "Nothing's going on. She's my boss." "Dad, I follow the business news. I saw the press conference. I saw how she looked at you." Sarah reached across the table, squeezed his hand. "And more importantly, I saw how you looked at her." "It's complicated." Ryan felt suddenly exhausted, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing down. "She's brilliant and driven, and she's taught me things about leadership I never knew I needed to learn. But we're from completely different worlds. She went to Harvard. I learned engineering by reading manuals and making mistakes. Mom was a nurse. You were a machinist. Different worlds, too." Sarah's voice was soft but firm. But you built something beautiful together because you respected each other and worked as a team. That's what I see with you and Victoria. Ryan wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why it was impossible, but sitting there in the kitchen where he'd shared 20 years with Linda, being counseled by the daughter they'd raised to be honest and brave, Ryan couldn't lie to himself anymore. He was falling for Victoria Sterling, and it terrified him. Mom would want you to be happy. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She told me that before she died. Made me promise to remind you when the time was right. She said you'd try to be loyal to her memory by staying alone. But real loyalty meant honoring what she wanted for you. A full life, with love and joy, and someone to share it with. The words broke something open in Ryan's chest. He stood, crossed to the window, stared out at the winter-dead lawn that would green again come spring. I don't know if Victoria wants that. Hell, I don't know if I want that. It's only been 3 years. There's no timeline for grief, Dad. And there's no rule that says moving forward means forgetting. Sarah joined him at the window. You taught me that the bravest thing you can do is show up when it matters. Well, this matters. Don't let fear make you run. Ryan pulled his daughter into a hug, held her tight, and felt the truth of her words settle into his bones. Linda was gone, but he was still here, still living, still capable of building something new from the ashes of what he'd lost. The question was whether he had the courage to try. Monday morning, Ryan walked into Victoria's office and closed the door behind him. She looked up from her computer, surprise flickering across her face. Ryan, I wasn't expecting you until the board meeting at 10. This can't wait. Ryan crossed to her desk, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. I need to say something, and if I don't say it now, I'm going to lose my nerve. Victoria set down her pen, gave him her full attention. All right? Ryan took a breath, let it out slowly. 6 months ago, you fired me because I didn't fit the image of what you thought Sterling Technologies needed. And you were right, I didn't fit. I was rough edges and practical knowledge in a world that valued polish and credentials. Ryan, I've apologized for that. Let me finish. Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. You were right, but you were also wrong. Because what Sterling needed wasn't more people who looked good in presentations. It needed people who gave a damn about doing the work right, about protecting the team, about building things that lasted. I know that now. Victoria's voice was quiet. And somewhere along the way, while we were fighting Marcus and rebuilding the X10 and saving this company together, I stopped seeing you as the CEO who fired me. I started seeing you as Victoria, the woman who learned to admit when she was wrong, who showed up at Maria's daughter's quinceañera, who stood on that stage and faced down a man who tried to destroy her. Ryan paused, gathering courage. I'm falling for you. And that terrifies me because I loved my wife with everything I had. And part of me feels like loving again means betraying her memory. But Sarah reminded me that Linda wanted me to keep living, to find happiness. So I'm here, being honest, even though it might be the stupidest thing I've ever done. The silence that followed felt infinite. Victoria stared at him, her expression unreadable, and Ryan felt his heart sink. He'd misread the signals, projected his own feelings onto professional respect, made a fool of himself. Victoria stood, walked around the desk, and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked. Ryan answered by pulling her closer, deepening the kiss, letting himself feel everything he'd been pushing down for months. She tasted like coffee and possibility, and when they finally broke apart, both breathless, Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears.
I fired you because you reminded me of my father. The parts of him I'd tried to bury under business school polish and corporate strategy. Her voice shook. And then you came back and showed me that those parts weren't weaknesses. They were the foundation everything else was built on. Victoria, I'm falling for you too, Ryan Matthews. And it terrifies me, because I failed at marriage once, spectacularly. Because we work together and that complicates everything. Because you deserve someone who didn't have to learn basic human decency through crisis and failure. She laughed, the sound wet with emotion. But I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. So I'm choosing you, if you'll have me. Ryan kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We're going to have to tell HR. Victoria laughed, genuine and free. We're going to have to tell the board. And my mother, if she lives long enough to hear it.
She's going to say, I told you so, because she's been telling me for months that I looked at you like you hung the moon. Did I? Ryan's voice was teasing, warm. You fixed the things I broke. That's close enough. Victoria sobered, her hands framing his face. This won't be easy. People will talk, will say I'm dating the help or you're using me for advancement. Let them talk. Ryan's voice was firm, certain. I've spent my whole life being underestimated because I didn't have the right credentials. I'm not going to let other people's opinions stop me from being happy. They stood there in her office, wrapped in each other, and somewhere in the back of Ryan's mind, he could almost hear Linda laughing, proud and delighted, and telling him it was about damn time. The board meeting at 10 was routine until Victoria made an announcement that turned routine into chaos. She and Ryan had agreed to be transparent from the start, to own the relationship rather than let rumors define it.
Before we proceed with the quarterly review, I have a disclosure to make. Victoria's voice was steady, professional. Ryan Matthews and I have entered into a personal relationship. We've informed HR, updated our conflict of interest disclosures, and ensured that all corporate governance protocols are being followed. The room erupted. Board members exchanged glances, some surprised, others knowing. Arthur Penhaligon looked like he'd expected this for months. One of the older directors, a man who'd served under Victoria's father, smiled with something like approval. This is highly irregular. Another director, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, frowned. The optics alone are irrelevant, Victoria cut her off smoothly. Ryan is the most qualified person for his position, hired through proper channels with board approval. Our personal relationship has no bearing on his professional performance or the company's operations. But perception matters in business. The steel-haired director wasn't backing down. Investors will question whether decisions are being made based on emotion rather than strategy. Ryan had stayed quiet, letting Victoria handle the board politics, but this he couldn't let pass. He stood, met the director's gaze. With respect, ma'am, the only emotion driving my decisions for the past 6 months has been anger. At Marcus Wade for trying to destroy what good people build. At a system that values credentials over capability. At the idea that perception matters more than results. His voice was calm, but carried an edge. I don't make decisions based on who I'm dating. I make them based on what's right for this company and the people who depend on it. If you want to question my judgment, judge me by the X10 production numbers and the Pentagon contracts, not by where I have dinner. The room went quiet. Then General Brooks, attending as a special observer due to Sterling's defense contracts, spoke up.
I've worked with Matthews for 6 months now. He's got more integrity in his little finger than most executives I've dealt with have in their entire bodies.
Brooks's voice carried the weight of 4 decades in military procurement. If this board is more concerned about who he's dating than whether he's doing his job, then you're focused on the wrong metrics. The steel-haired director subsided, outmaneuvered. The board moved on to the quarterly review, but Ryan could feel the shift in the room. Some directors supportive, others reserving judgment, waiting to see if this relationship would strengthen Sterling or become another crisis to manage. After the meeting, General Brooks pulled Ryan aside in the hallway.
That took guts, speaking up like that.
Seemed like the right time to establish boundaries. Ryan shrugged.
Your father was military?
Brooks asked abruptly. Navy, 2 tours in Vietnam. Taught me that respect is earned through action, not demanded through position.
Brooks nodded slowly. He taught you well. Keep doing what you're doing, Matthews. The Pentagon doesn't care who you're sleeping with, as long as you keep delivering hardware that works.
It was crude but honest, and Ryan appreciated the directness. Will do, sir. As Brooks walked away, Victoria appeared at Ryan's elbow. That was terrifying and wonderful, and I can't believe you just told off a board member. She was wrong. Ryan's voice was simple, factual, and someone needed to say it. Victoria laced her fingers through his, a small gesture of solidarity in the corporate battlefield. What did I do to deserve you? You learned to admit when you were wrong. In my experience, that's rarer than diamonds. Ryan squeezed her hand. Now come on. We've got an X11 design review in 20 minutes, and I'm not letting personal drama make us miss deadlines.
They walked down the hallway together, CEO and COO, lovers and partners, 2 people from different worlds who'd found common ground in crisis and built something worth fighting for. Behind them, the Sterling Technologies logo gleamed on the wall, a testament to everything they'd survived and everything they'd yet to build. The story wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more battles, more moments when the odds seemed impossible. But Ryan Matthews had learned something in the past 6 months that changed everything. You didn't need credentials to be a hero. You just needed to show up when it mattered and refuse to let the bastards grind you down. And as long as he had that, as long as he had Victoria beside him and a team worth fighting for, Ryan figured they could handle whatever came next.